Hello and welcome. It's 10 a.m. on Wednesday, the 6th of August. You're tuned into our mid-morning newscast here on ARIRANG TV. I'm Mark Broom, and let's take a look at what's making the headlines. As a second American missionary stricken with Ebola arrives at a U.S. hospital, the World Health Organization calls an urgent meeting to ascertain if the outbreak constitutes a public health emergency of grave international concern. The United States calls on Japan to address the issue of its wartime sexual enslavement of women in a way that promotes healing and better relations with its neighbours. Plus, Pope Francis will meet with the survivors and the families of victims of April's Sewol-ho ferry disaster during his upcoming visit to Korea. We start this morning with the latest on the Ebola outbreak in West Africa. As fears rise, the World Health Organization has announced that it will convene a two-day meeting of its emergency committee, this starting on Thursday. They hope to determine whether the current outbreak, which has killed almost 900 people, is a public health emergency of grave international concern. A spokesperson for the WHO said the main subject of the meeting will be the Ebola epidemic prevalent in Guinea, Sierra Leone and Liberia. In the meantime, the second American Ebola patient has arrived on U.S. soil. Nancy Wright-Ball, one of the two missionaries who contracted the deadly virus in Liberia, was wheeled into a hospital in Atlanta on Tuesday. The patient, flown from Africa overnight, will be treated in the same isolation unit as Dr. Kent Brantley, the other U.S. Ebola patient.
Copy.
Now, breaking a period of silence on the matter, the United States government has branded Japan's wartime practice of sexually enslaving thousands upon thousands of women during the wartime as a clear and serious violation of human rights. The State Department says Tokyo needs to do much more to resolve the issue so it can improve relations with its neighbours. Shin Se-min reports.
The United States is urging Japan to resolve the issue of its wartime system of sex slavery and take responsibility for its past atrocities.
We encourage Japan to continue to address this issue in a manner that promotes healing and facilitates better relations with neighboring states.
The State Department confirmed a report on Tuesday that White House and State Department representatives held closed-door interviews with Il-chul and Kang Il-chul, two Korean victims of Japan's sex slavery system, to discuss their experiences. Emphasizing that it wasn't the first face-to-face meeting between the women and U.S. officials, the spokesperson said Washington was open to holding similar meetings again in the future.
It is deplorable and clearly a grave human rights violation of enormous proportions that the Japanese military was involved in the trafficking of women for sexual purposes in the 1930s and 1940s.
Citing a spokesman at the U.S. National Safety Council, Korea's Yonhap News Agency also reports the two women met with the officials from the White House Office of Public Engagement. However, the names of the officials who met with the women have not been disclosed. Il-chul and Kang Il-chul are currently traveling around the U.S., taking part in memorial events remembering the victims of the Japan's historical wrongdoings. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Now, North Korea appears to be negotiating new arms deals with two Islamic terrorist groups, using Iran as a logistical link in that chain. The US-based website 38 North raised the possibility this week, saying Pyongyang has a historical and possibly continuing arms relationship with non-state actors in the Middle East, namely Hamas and Hezbollah. The report states Hamas may have to restock its weaponry, as the group has apparently fired more than 3,000 rockets into Israel during its current conflict there. The British daily The Telegraph also reported that Hamas is negotiating a new arms deal with North Korea. Now, weapons the two groups could buy from the North include AK-47s and ammunition, mortar bombs, rocket-propelled grenades, anti-tank missiles and surface-to-surface missiles. Now, responding to public uproar about this very controversial case, the Korean government has vowed to expand its probe into the killing of a young army conscript who died after being struck in the chest by senior soldiers who had already put him through months of mental and physical torment. Yulian reports.
speaking about the 23-year-old young soldier who was bullied to death back in April, President Park Geun-hye vowed a thorough investigation and punishment for those found responsible. The comments came during a cabinet meeting Tuesday morning, a day after Defense Minister Han Min-gu apologized to the nation over the failure to prevent such an incident from occurring.
It's a military commander's basic responsibility to send enlisted men back to their parents safe and sound. We feel a great burden over this incident.
The 23-year-old Yoon was bullied severely by his comrades back in April when he was forced to hold a horse-riding stance until the early hours of the morning and told to lick spit off the ground. He choked to death after being hit in the chest by 5 of his comrades. The army announced it will consider pressing murder charges against the 5 soldiers if found responsible for the young soldier's death. It's the latest in a series of similar incidents in recent months, and public distrust in the military is growing. An army sergeant who had been bullied by his comrades went on a shooting rampage back in June, killing 5.
When my son goes to the army, I'm going to check his body whenever I visit to see if he has been physically abused. I'm worried he may have to go through the same thing and be forced to hide it.
Harsh military practices and a distorted rank-based culture which seniors can use to abuse junior enlisted soldiers has long been prevalent in the military. To maintain a strong defense against North Korea, all South Korean men are mandated to serve in the military. But the recurrence of abuse-led deaths has the nation deeply worried about the safety of their sons. 유리안 아리랑 뉴스.
And as a follow-up to that report, Korea's army chief stepped down on Tuesday to take responsibility for his failure to adequately deal with the death of that young conscript soldier. The Defense Ministry says General Kwon Oh-sung wanted to apologize to the Korean people for causing concern over the recent incidents in the army. But he wasn't the only one to go on Tuesday, in actual fact, because the nation's police chief, Lee Sung-han, also resigned for failing to promptly identify the body of the fugitive owner of the sunken Seoul-ho ferry Yoo Byung-an. Meanwhile, sources say the government has recommended that Seoul's police chief Kang Shin-myung replace Lee as National Police Commissioner.
Get connected to Korea and the world. Join us every weekday for the latest developments out of Korea, Asia, and beyond. On air, on your mobile, and online, we lead the way every day. ARIRANG News.
To try and resolve the crisis in Ukraine, the European Union also offers 50... Now, Korea is very excited, extremely excited, to welcome Pope Francis to the country next week. And the Pope will be in Korea for a 5-day visit on what will be his first trip to Asia as pontiff. It might be a very short trip, but the leader of the Catholic Church will be keeping an extremely tight schedule. Our Im Yoon-hee has the details.
This will be Pope Francis' first visit to Asia since his inauguration as pontiff in February 2013. Upon his arrival on Thursday, the Pope is set to meet with President Park Geun-hye. As for the rest of his schedule, he'll take part in a celebratory mass in Daejeon, where he'll meet with around 20 youth representatives from 17 Asian countries. He will also attend the beatification mass of 124 Korean martyrs, who lost their lives mostly during the 19th century under severe religious persecution. The mass will be the largest event during the Pope's visit to Korea, held at Gwanghwamun Square in central Seoul, with nearly 1,900 priests and some 200,000 Catholic faithfuls attending. The pontiff will meet with the Asian bishops in Hemi, located in the country's southwest region, followed by a concluding mass for the 6th Asian Youth Day. And Pope Francis is wrapping up his visit with a mass for peace and reconciliation in Seoul, inviting nearly 1,000 people, including former victims of Japan's wartime sexual enslavement during the early 20th century. The preparatory committee for this visit says he will also meet bereaved families and victims of the April ferry disaster upon the requests of the bereaved families.
We delivered the message immediately to Rome and received a positive response. We will be inviting families of the victims to a mass held on August 15th.
The Pope is expected to give words of peace and healing, not only to the bereaved families, but the entire nation as well. Im Yoon-hee, ARIRANG News.
Now turning to some domestic politics, and following last month's by-election defeat, Korea's main opposition party has been left without a leader and is not likely to have one until next year's party convention in the winter. For the time being, though, interim leader Park Young-sun is at the helm and she's promising a clean break from the past. Our Ji Myung-gil reports.
Park Young-sun, who is serving as both the full leader of the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy and the interim chief of its emergency committee, has been tasked with rebuilding and reforming the party. The committee will carry out a set of reforms until a new leadership is selected early next year.
Our party will select members for the emergency committee from both inside and out of the party. The public can also make recommendations through Twitter, Facebook, or our party's website.
The committee will function as the main opposition's executive branch until a party convention next year, sometime before March. There, officials will pick the party's new chairman, secretary general, and other senior executives. In her new role, Park, a three-term lawmaker, is faced with the arduous task of finding a way to unify different factions within the party and forging a new path.
The future of the New Politics Alliance for Democracy depends on how well we extricate ourselves from old customs and old politics.
The pro-Nomuyon arm once held the lion's share of power, but was weakened following the defeat of former presidential hopeful Moon Jae-in, a key pro-No figure, in the 2012 presidential election. Pundits say that the pro-No faction is now likely to make a comeback. The main opposition party has been in a state of turmoil since its defeat in last week's parliamentary by-elections. The party won just 4 of the 15 parliamentary seats up for grabs, prompting party co-leaders Kim Han-gil and An Chol-soo to step down to take responsibility. Ji Myung-gil, ARIRANG News.
Korea's largest ever personal data leak earlier this year is prompting financial regulators here to make some rather sweeping changes. Starting on this Thursday, companies and websites will no longer be allowed to collect resident registration numbers, which are routinely required to log into websites for financial transactions. The 13-digit number, roughly equivalent to the Social Security number in the US and assigned to every Korean at their birth, have been the biggest target of data theft in recent years. Now, the Home Affairs Ministry says the changes are part of efforts to prevent identity theft and the loss of personal information. Violators who still ask for this resident registration number will be subject to fines of up to nearly $30,000 US, and the new measures come after nearly 20 million customers of the nation's 3 major financial institutions had their personal data leaked earlier this year. Korea's Samsung Electronics has knocked its rival Apple off its perch in the highly competitive North American smartphone market, thanks largely to robust sales of its latest flagship smartphone, the Galaxy S5. Market research firm Strategy Analytics says Samsung's share in the market came to 36.2% in the second quarter. Apple dropped to second place at 28%. Industry watchers said this turnaround came as Samsung strengthened its sales with the Galaxy S5, while Apple loyalists held back on purchasing new devices as the new iPhone, the iPhone 6, is expected to be released later in the year. Korea's LG Electronics also posted a record market share of 12% in North America over the cited period. Time now for a look through some of the other international headlines we're following on this Wednesday morning. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim, standing by at the News Centre. Good morning, Eunice.
Good morning to you, Mark.
So, Eunice, we're about 20 hours now into this 3-day ceasefire on the Gaza Strip. It seems to be holding.
Indeed, it does. A rare lull in the sounds of sirens and explosions on the Gaza Strip, and Israel also, for that matter. The Israeli Defense Forces, or IDF, pulled out of Gaza a full 4 weeks after the launch of Operation Protective Edge on July 8th. Rocket fire into Israel also ceased as the truce went into effect 8 a.m. Tuesday local time. IDF's Chief Major General said its mission was accomplished, citing the destruction of the 32 so-called terror tunnels. Palestinians returned home to survey the damage as a delegation in Cairo will campaign for an internationally funded reconstruction effort, for now proposed to be overseen by the Mahmoud Abbas government. The cost to rebuild is estimated to be at least $6 billion, according to Palestine's Deputy Prime Minister. Attention will now shift to negotiations in Egypt, where an Israeli delegation has reportedly arrived to hammer out a longer-term peace deal with their Palestinian counterparts. An American two-star general has been killed in Afghanistan after a man wearing Afghan army garb opened fire on a NATO squad at a training center in Kabul Tuesday. 15 others were wounded, among them local army officers, American troops, and a German brigadier general. The U.S. general is the most senior American officer to die in Afghanistan since 9/11. A spokesman for Afghanistan's defense ministry said the shooter, a quote, terrorist, had been shot and killed, but offered no motive for the strike. The suspected insider attack left soldiers tense and underlined the challenges still remaining in preparing Afghanistan for Western troop withdrawals. Ukrainian forces are closing in on the rebel-held stronghold of Donetsk, but the heavy fighting is triggering a warning by the UN that a massive exodus and destruction could be ahead. At least 2 civilians were killed in heavy clashes Tuesday as explosions sent residents scurrying underground to bomb shelters. Dozens of cars were seen leaving the industrial hub. It was not immediately clear who was responsible for the bombing, though. Rebels accused Kiev's forces for the campaign against Donetsk, while Kiev has denied using firepower against residential neighborhoods. And finally, a 41-year-old convicted sex offender was arrested and charged for possession and promotion of child porn after Google scanned his Gmail account and alerted authorities. Houston police said the online company had notified the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in the U.S. after detecting explicit pictures of a young girl in an email sent by the man. Google explained it uses special technology that attaches a digital fingerprint to such images of children, enabling its systems to identify them. It did add that no other criminal activity is targeted with this technology. U.S. federal law requires entities to report child exploitation when it is spotted, but this development is raising privacy concerns.
And a good Wednesday morning to you all as we kick things off with the ongoing search for the next head coach of the South Korean national football team. And if you thought there was progress by now, well, not exactly. In fact, the search for the right head coach got a little tougher as the consensus #1 choice for the job, Bert van Marwijk, is in the process of signing with Belgium's KRC Genk. The 62-year-old Dutch coach led the Dutch national team from 2008 to 2012 and has been regarded as the best man available for the Korean national team job. Meanwhile, Lee Young-soo, the head of the technical committee, left to the Netherlands to speak with Van Marwijk. Well, one thing's for sure, finding a Korean golfer on the Rolex World Ranking in women's golf isn't hard, and looks like another Korean golfer broke the top 20 ranking this week. 19-year-old Kim Hyo-ju, who broke the single-season earnings record this past weekend in the KLPGA after winning the 2014 Hanwha Financial Classic, jumped up a few spots and is now ranked 19th in the world. That's the highest that she's been ranked in her career and also becomes the highest-ranked KLPGA golfer this season. And now shifting over to basketball this time, with the 2014 FIBA World Cup and the 2014 Incheon Asian Games coming up, the South Korean national basketball team finalized their roster on Tuesday. Now, after talking with head coach Yoo Jae-hak, the big man Ha Seung-jin was cut from the team as they decided to make up the height by going with 4 centers, including the young guns in Kim Jong-gyu and Oh Se-gun. Meanwhile, Moon Tae-jong was selected as the lone half-Korean player on the squad as his experience outweighed his age. Meanwhile, the team will begin training today before they leave to Spain for the upcoming World Cup. And now moving over to some Tuesday night KBO action, we finally got all 4 games in this time as the Lotte Giants and the NC Dinos had their game suspended in the 5th inning due to a power outage as they're tied 1-1 at the 5th inning and will resume at 4 p.m. today. Also, the Nexen Heroes cruised past the SK Wyverns 8-3 and the Samsung Lions crushed the Hanwha Eagles 14-1. Meanwhile, let's take a look at the Tucson Bears take on the Kia Tigers. And of course, going into the game here, we go to the 2nd inning. Na Ji-wan deep to left field, got a leadoff home run, gives the Kia Tigers the 1-0 lead. But here come the Tucson Bears in the bottom of the inning. Hong Sang-eun with an RBI single to left ties the game before Yang E-ji at bat triples to right center, giving the Tucson Bears a 2-1 lead. Next play, Kim Jae-ho, a clutch RBI single scores Yang E-ji from 3rd, and it's now 3-1. Now Tucson continues to swing away, including a 5-run 5th inning as they end their 4-game losing streak with an 8-2 victory. And now finishing things off in the PGA, where the 2014 PGA Championship is set to begin on Thursday, U.S. time. But before all that, all the focus is on whether or not Tiger Woods will participate in the event. Now, Woods, who pulled out of the Bridgestone Invitational over the weekend after hurting his back, is uncertain whether or not he will compete in the upcoming major. But his caddy, Joe LaCava, who is already in Louisville, Kentucky without Tiger, is optimistic, hoping that his back will be good enough for him to compete. Of course, Tiger needs to compete to have any chance at qualifying for the FedEx Cup playoff and a chance at making the U.S. Riders' Cup team. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. Well, I'm sure many of us experienced tropical nights last night as the temperatures didn't drop below 25 degrees Celsius even after dark. Well, for today, central regions should see 5 to 10 millimeters of precipitation between in the morning and the afternoon hours, while the southern provinces will see outbreaks of rain. And a scorching day is in picture, with highs hovering in the low to mid 30s in the southern provinces, with the heat wave advisory still in place. But daytime high in Seoul will be a tad lower than yesterday, as the high in Seoul will rise to 29, but Daegu will soar to 34, and Gwangju will reach 32, and Busan will have a daily high of 30 this afternoon. Now, for other regions, it looks like Jeju Island and Daejeon will top out at 30, and Dokdo should see highs of 28 this afternoon. Now, Super Typhoon Halong is forecast to shift direction toward Japan. It's predicted to approach to Kyushu in Japan this weekend, but you know the typhoon is very strong and powerful that it should give indirect effect in Jeju and the southern coast areas starting Friday. Well, that's all for Korea, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all we have for now, but we do have more news coming up at noon, in fact, Korea time. Until then, goodbye.